My kids are addicted to being off screen. They have such full and vibrant lives. But don't be fooled. 10 years ago, I was a YouTube babysitter mom. This is how it was. 6 in the morning. I had woken up 4 times with the baby, and my daughter is ready to get up. So what do? I hand her my phone. I let her watch YouTube. I was naive and I was lazy, and I didn't realize I was planting seeds of passivity that would cripple her growth into who God made her to be. But today, we've managed to make cutting back screen time into a permanent change for our family. We went from raising iPad kids to raising young women who are daily walking into the strength that they need for adulthood. In this video, I'm pulling back the curtain on why the clean shows were actually the most destructive, and my weirdly simple trick for getting my high energy kids to sit still without a screen, and our radical 3-step vetting system for when we actually do use screens. Then, why kids are addicted to video games and the dirt they need instead to build true character. These are the exact steps that I took to go from fighting with my kids about screen time to building a life of real heroes. If you don't know me, I'm Angelica. I'm a Christian parenting coach married to a youth pastor for 19 years next month. I'm also a mom of 3 daughters who I have had to figure out how to raise them to be strong and love Jesus in a world that has all these screens screaming for their attention. We've spent the last decade discipling our children to love real life more than virtual life, and this has yielded more fruit than we could ever dream. But getting here came from a brutal wake-up call. I had to realize that I had fallen into the clean content trap. It's fun to show your kids something that you think they'll enjoy, and it's very convenient to be able to occupy them for a while. But maybe you've had this experience where your beloved pig family from the UK turns out to have neighbors that have 2 moms. Hey kids, let's watch my favorite movie growing up. 5 minutes in, you hear a line that you think, that totally went over my head when I was a kid. And what were my parents thinking letting me watch this? See, children are the true conservative. They're not just being entertained. They're building their worldview. There were 5 mental shifts that I had to make from where we were then to now, where my girls are daily putting on the strength that they need to become the people God has created them to be. First was the law of seeds, and this has totally transformed my way of thinking. The Bible talks about how you reap what you sow, and constantly what we're putting into our lives is what they will become later. So I had to look around and say, well, what are we sowing? What seeds are we planting? And the first result of that was I was completely overwhelmed and felt very guilty, and then got very grumpy. So if a child asked, "Can I watch?" then my response was sharp. And this has happened to me so many times in my life when I realize I need to change. The change becomes overwhelming because you see that issue everywhere. So instead of wallowing in my guilt, I had to think practically. What am I aiming for? And what seeds do I need to plant to get me there? Well, it turns out that screens provide none of the seeds that I want to develop in my children. I've never wanted my kids to be in a bubble. I know the goal of my parenting is to equip them to leave the house, not to remain hidden in it. But I realized that the form of the content matters, not just the content. So we traded visual seeds for literary seeds. The problem I had with movies is that they're so fast-paced. We were watching Mulan together as a family, a childhood favorite from my husband, and the things were happening so fast. They're flashing through these worldview ideologies, and I'm like, whoa, what? My children are just receiving. No discernment is going into that movie experience. It's so fast. But with a book, you can linger. You can ask questions. It invites discernment and invites deeper thinking. So we switched from visual stories to audiobooks. Audiobooks also develop their language capacity, which really is their ceiling for how they can understand the world and how they can influence the world. Our top 3 family audiobook recommendations would be 3 different series: The Chronicles of Narnia, The Wingfeather Saga, and The Green Ember. But as much as we love audiobooks in our house, we've actually cut back on them some because you know what trumps audiobooks? Read alouds. Because the point of parenting is not to send your kid off at all. It's to equip them together. Now, early on, my kids could not sit still. What saved me was blanket training. Each girl had their very own blanket that they had to stay on while I read them a picture book. That served me so well. It set them up for this read aloud habit that we have really developed as a family. Now, as soon as dinner's over, they beg my husband to read aloud. It has bound us together so strongly. When we were reading through the Wingfeather Saga, our girls were literally screaming and jumping up and down on the couch because of the plot in the story. And we're just dying laughing. This reading aloud habit is not just for little kids. It has continued to grow with us. With my middle 2, we read together every night before bed. And I've started getting 2 books for them. Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lynn. That's one that we read. Right now, we're in the middle of a book. Don't know if I would recommend it. It has lots of cuss words, and I wish I was reading it aloud so I could just skip them. But it does have a very engaging story, but I would recommend reading it aloud, not the read with them technique. So the book is Little Britches, and it's been such an emotional read for us. You can see how this would bind us together and help equip children through discernment. The father moves his family to a ranch in Colorado in 1907. And so his father is incredible man. And Ralph, the boy, is learning to be this incredible man after his example. And there's a storm, and Ralph is horseback riding, racing home, but the bridge had washed out, and his horse winds up breaking a leg, and Ralph has to put him down. And I'm like sobbing, can't read. My 8-year-old is crying. My 11-year-old is just making it through, right, to finish the chapter. And it was almost traumatizing. I would never have chosen to do it, but it was so impactful. We experienced that sorrow together, and we got to really talk through the hard issue of trying to love a creature who is suffering and what Ralph decided to do about that. That would never come from a screen. Reading aloud doesn't stop in the teenage years either. My daughter and I and her friend who was 15 are reading and doing podcasts on the books we're reading. So right now we're reading Till We Have Faces. Y'all, we have talked about so much from this book, and you can listen to the podcast. I'll link it below. One thing we had to talk about recently, there was a quote in here about a woman. Can I say this on here? She said, okay, the woman had to wind up killing a man. And she said, it was like losing my virginity. You know, young teenage girls are talking about this with me, and it was a really good conversation. But that would not happen through a movie or a screen, right? The book is helping me disciple my children, and I'm very thankful. The most important book we ever read with our children is the Bible, and we make sure we read it regularly and often with our kids. This is the true source of living ideas that has totally changed our family, and those 20 minutes are the most important time that we spend with our kids. So we have a free webinar that you can get that will train you how we read the Bible with our kids in a way that's very effective, very engaging, and helps them to fall in love with Christ. But those books have stuck with us, have brought us together as a family. And it's one of the key ways that we've been able to help our kids develop discernment, because you can talk through books. They're at a pace where you can stop and talk. So do we ever watch movies? Yes. But the general rule is that movies are for moderate to severe injuries or stomach bugs. Years ago, my oldest daughter was running through the woods and she tripped and cut her face right here. And so we were at the ER getting stitches, and this wonderful lady came in with a wonderful iPad, and they made cupcakes together. And I thought, thank you, Lord, for iPads. That is the best use of them because what do? Steal time. And sometimes that's exactly what you want to happen. But we do have a 3-step vetting process for any time that we want to watch something. We basically never watch shows because you can't vet them as well. And what's the point of the show? To get you to watch the next one. So with movies, first, we don't ever trust our memory. I've been burned with that so many times that we read up on it first, usually from plugged in online. And it has to qualify biblically for something that we want to put into our minds. In Philippians 4:8, Paul says what we should put into our minds. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellent, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. The third requirement we have for using screens is that it's public. I'm never going back to giving my little child or my teenage child a screen for her to go off and entertain herself with. But even with all those qualifications, the point of the screen is important. Remember, children are the true conservative. That means how they're starting, they will continue throughout their adulthood. But early on, I was naive. This was before every kid had a tablet. James and I literally bungee corded a laptop to the back of the seat so that our kid could watch a movie while we took a trip. Or we would go to the library and check out little learning tablets so that they could be occupied. But what I didn't realize was that those screens were stealing the time that I had with my child. And they were crippling her ability to develop mastery over herself. So if it's for my convenience, if I'm trying to get rid of my kid so that I can have an adult conversation, or I'm trying to not be humiliated in public because the day's gone long and she hasn't learned to stop whining yet, I'm setting her up for failure. Ironically, I want to be too lazy to not do the hard work now. Because if I don't do the hard work now of training my children what to do when they're bored or have to wait a long time, I'm just going to make it harder on myself later. But if I do the hard thing and use the boring moments of life to help them develop their character, then my life will get easier. Now, even with injuries, I try to stay in the moment and think about what's going on. In January, my youngest daughter attempted the monkey bars and failed and broke her elbow. So we went home. And yes, we used a screen. She watched Mary Poppins while I walked around trying to figure out if I should get it checked out or not. And it was broken. But at the follow-up appointment, when she wasn't really in pain, it took forever. I think it's the longest I've ever waited for a doctor. We waited in the waiting room, and then we moved to the patient room, and we still waited for the doctor. My phone was burning a hole in my pocket. I knew I could just pull up photos, and we could scroll. But I wanted to see if we could make it without the phone. So we identified every piece of medical equipment in the room. And when that entertainment ended and we couldn't talk about her day anymore, we started making up jokes that we could tell to the doctor when he came in. You want to hear some of them? Okay, we're not good at this. Where did the munchkin break his arm? Somewhere over the elbow. Okay, maybe this one's better. What did the hobbit say when he fell off the monkey bars? Oh, I think I broke my Bilbo. Did we actually tell the doctor? No, but we should have because he looked like a dwarf. Beside the point, we didn't have courage, but we did make a great memory. We still laugh about it, especially when the doctor came in. We were so giggly because we were thinking about those jokes. We tried to grow our skills of joke telling, but even if that failed, we did develop the skill of keeping up your spirits in a waiting room. And that hour bound us together in a way that scrolling never could. The truth is, screens are stunting. When I drive through the country, I love seeing those big oak trees that are in a cow field with a little pond. They have a good-sized trunk, But what's really impressive is their canopy. They actually have space to expand. And I love the trees in my woods, but none of them have a canopy like that. They're all crowded in from the other things around them. And that's what screens do, stunt your children's growth. But when you cut back the screens, their lives can grow expansively in multiple directions. Screens provide something we want, but it's a fake reality. So we want stories. But what if we take those fake stories and turn them into real ones? So we have people over for dinner and we hear stories all night. That's real life. We talk to our neighbors outside. That's real stories. And our neighbors are some good storytellers. On screens, we see these conflicts of good and evil. Well, now our kids play with neighbors and they have lots of conflict. And those conflicts are not easy, but they are the equipment of real life developing real character in our children. What value do video games give? They give heroism and they give opportunities for creativity. So let's take that fake life and put those into real life. Our family really picked up on this during the COVID years. We started going on family adventures. During those adventures, our kids get dirty, they get uncomfortable, and they experience true small bouts of danger. They have real life adventure. Our favorite adventure when our kids were little was catching crawfish. And I'm so glad my husband knew how to do this growing up. So we find streams, we have nets, we catch the crawfish. It's a blast. And we still do it every year. And now I would say my favorite adventure as we upgrade our adventure skills every year is paddleboarding to this great spot on the railroad tracks where we can pick berries. So that's where you'll find us in August. And we get scratched up, we're hot, we get to eat a lot of berries, and that experience binds us together in ways obviously a screen could never do. I want my kids to have real adventures that involve real pain, like walking further than they think they can after they sprain their ankle. That's what develops the true heart of a hero. Another value screens have is the ability to be creative, like making the cupcake, but I want my kids to be creative in real life. So they've made lots and lots of cupcakes. Not having the easy screen makes them have to do the hard thing of deciding what to do with their time. Being bored is such a trial for children. So I get my kids to write an ambitions list in the summer where they have goals, they have things they want to pursue, they just can't remember at the time what those are. They have pursued all kinds of things because they've had that expansive space to stretch out. So some of the things that my kids are into: cooking, jump roping, whittling, building forts, digging pits, ukulele, piano, singing, board games, Legos, puppet shows, and the most important of all, training the puppy. But here's the secret. You actually have to notice the pleasure that you get off of the screen. So anytime we hike, I try to ask, what was your favorite part? What did you see that was the most interesting to you? And calling attention to the pleasures you're getting away from the dopamine hit of a screen is super helpful in making the change that you want to do. Another thing that I had to learn to notice was small steps toward positive growth. I am a naturally very critical person, but when we have planted a seed and you see a little seedling, we don't just smash the seedling because it's not big enough yet. We know that that tiny seedling is a promise for continued growth. So I had to see how my kids are toughening up and acknowledge that to myself and to them, or see how they are encouraging others. I literally had to bullet journal this for years to change the way I think about my kid. I wanted to see those small steps as significant because they are the work of God and they are promise for their future. And I had to learn to lean into those pleasures myself. So when my third kid was waking me up before the sun came up, I had grown, right? I took my coffee outside on the porch and we sat there, and her go-to question was, what cat eat? That would be, what do cats eat? What dog eat? What squirrel eat? So we sat there and chatted about the diet of animals, and we listened to the train go by before the sun had even risen. And I would have much rather been sleeping, but Now, I'm so thankful for those moments where she insisted on my attention because any kid after the first one, you never feel like you have enough time for. Noticing the great pleasures that come from being off screens helps us to press forward with the changes we want and to be more confident in challenging our kids. Okay, the last tip for how I made this change in my family become permanent for years is that I intentionally set myself up in a stream of living ideas that would push me in this direction. I've never been fly fishing. I would love to. But you know how they're standing right in the middle of the stream, flicking the little fishing line? They know that fish are going to come by, right? They're not walking around finding them. Well, our sources of media can provide that stream for us. If you want videos like this to be a part of the stream of ideas that are fortifying you for the life you want to live for Christ, then hit subscribe. When I have determined to change, that's when I really have to take my thoughts captive. So when those thoughts of guilt and overwhelm come, I have to cling to the promises of God. Like one of my favorites in 2 Corinthians 12:9, where Jesus promises, "My grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in weakness." So Paul goes on to say, "Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly in my weaknesses, because then Christ could show his power through me." So whenever I would be overwhelmed with these guilty feelings and seeing the issues that I had been planting in my children, I had to go back and say, Jesus Christ's grace is sufficient for me. And he's going to show his power through changing me and changing my family. And that is totally what he has done. Stop managing screen time. Start cultivating heroes. May God bless your family.